Okay, so these narrative tenses, are they necessary? Yes and no. If you want to be able to tell stories in an interesting way, have people engage with how you're speaking and have them invest in the story you're telling, yes, you do need narrative tenses. If you just want to explain things as a sequence of events, past simple is fine. However, if you're working in business, if you're speaking English, if you're communicating with people, and you're going to be telling stories, you want people to engage, to be invested, to be interested in your stories. So it really, really, really is important to be able to mix up these four different tenses to make your stories more interesting. So the narrative tenses are past simple, past continuous, past perfect, and past perfect continuous. And we use them together. Every sentence is a mix of these. And we use them in the way that the past simple moves the story forward. The past continuous sets the background, creates the atmosphere. The past perfect looks further back into the story to what happened earlier. And the past perfect continuous describes an earlier activity that relates to the past time. So all of these used together create a beautiful storytelling. They're fantastic. The narrative tenses are very useful in English. We're going to dive into each of these tenses. Then we're going to look at a couple different stories where they're showcased together, and you can really see how beautifully they work and how essential they are in business English. And I'll give you a quiz at the very end to make sure you've locked in learning and know how to use each of these. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melissa B. Duarte, author of the Global Business English Mastery Series. Let's jump right in. Past simple. Of course, you know past simple, but you need to know how past simple works with these three other tenses in narrative tense usage. Okay, past simple, it shows that an action starts and finishes. We use past simple to say something's been completed in the past. We use past simple for a sequence of events. We use it for past states because we cannot use continuous for this. And we use it for interrupting events. When you have past continuous, something happening, and then something interrupts it. That's your past simple. Okay, now we have the past continuous. Past simple, essential in storytelling. Past continuous, it sets the scene, sets the background, sets the atmosphere of a situation. It shows an action which is in progress. It shows an action which is interrupted. That's when you put your past simple in. It shows two simultaneous actions. If two actions are happening at the same time, this is what you're going to use, past continuous. And of course, temporary past situations. If something was temporary, it wasn't a state in the past, it was temporary, not long term, not repeated. You use the past continuous. Okay, now things are getting a little bit more advanced. Now we're looking at the past perfect. So the past perfect we use for an earlier past event, something that happened before another time in the past, an action completed before another action. That's your past perfect. Completed actions before a certain point in the past. So something that was already finished before something else happened is when you use past perfect. Causes and explanations. Something happened because this had happened before, or you're explaining why something happened. You're giving background basically of something. And you also use it for an earlier experience, an experience that happened before, which changed your thought, your process, your action, what you did in the moment already in the past. And it's very useful for flashbacks. When you're going back in time and you want someone to travel with you back in time, through the story, you're using this to, it moves the whole timeline backwards and from the main timeline of your storytelling, and it pushes it back to show the background to give a flashback. Okay, the past perfect continuous is similar to the past continuous, but just pushed further back in time. So it focuses on the duration of something, how long an activity had been happening or had continued, shows an earlier ongoing activity, something in progress before another past event. It shows cause and results. So explains a past condition or a past result. It can also talk about repeated events or activities in the past, something that happened repeatedly in the past. And of course, just like all continuous tenses, there's a focus on the activity, a focus on the verb, emphasis on the process, on the action, on the duration. So the past simple, we're going to touch on it very briefly. We'll touch on the past continuous really quickly as well. We'll spend a little bit more time with the past perfect and past perfect continuous. Go ahead and skip ahead if you feel you don't need to review past simple and past continuous. However, it's not going to hurt. You really need to have a good understanding of the different ways we use past simple in storytelling to effectively mix it together with the narrative tenses. But go ahead and skip ahead if you want. But I'll make this quick, I promise. Okay, so past simple, main events. Past simple is your storytelling tense. It introduces the events. It sets the timeline. It sets the story. The manager entered the room. We started the meeting. Now we know what's happening. From then we can build. Okay. Next, you have past simple for completed actions. If something started in the past, ended in the past, it's past simple. Sequences. Use it for several actions that occur one after the other. He read the message, closed his laptop, and left the office. A sequence of events. This is how we use it. Past states. Now, states, remember, if you have any difficulty with this, it's very important that we don't put states in continuous form. So even if something was in the past and if it was an action verb, it would be in a continuous form. If it's a state, we don't use continuous. So a past state, this means describing feelings, opinions, possessions, what you have, or situations. I'll give you an example here. She believed the decision was unfair as they owned 3 offices at the time. So believe, owned. Both those are not action verbs. You can't use continuous. Next one, we use it for interrupting events or interrupting actions. This is when you put past simple together with the past continuous. So you have the past continuous as an event or an action in progress, and then it's the past simple that interrupts it. So we were discussing the budget when the fire alarm rang. We were discussing the budget, that's your past simple, when the fire alarm rang. So the fire alarm ringing, that was an interruption of what was happening in the past. We also use past simple for sudden events. We use it so frequently when something is unexpected, and we use it to add drama and make something a bit more dramatic in our storytelling. So suddenly the lights went out. So instead of saying suddenly we were looking in the dark, no, the lights went out. Something happened really quickly. So it is used for drama, for very sudden events. And of course, when you're using the past simple, this is when we say yesterday, last week, 2024, 2 hours ago, eventually, finally, and this is your past simple. Okay, so the past continuous is incredibly useful for setting the scene. It describes the background. It lets people understand what's happening in the situation around something. So the sun was shining, commuters were arriving off the train, and the city was starting to wake up. That's a whole cinematic opening for you right there, because we're putting it in past continuous. We're really showing the atmosphere, what's happening, what's going on. We also use past continuous for actions in progress at a particular time in the past. If you're saying at 10 o'clock yesterday, if you're saying in 2023, in May, if you're talking about an exact time in the past, you need to use past continuous. So at 10 o'clock, I was speaking to my manager. That's what was happening at that time in the past. We use the past continuous together with the past simple when we talk about actions that were interrupted. Now, the long action is your past continuous. The short action that interrupts the long action is your past simple. So I was reviewing the figures when the client called. I was reviewing the figures, that's your long action, when the client called. That's what interrupted it. We use the past continuous when 2 actions are happening at the same time in the past. While I was presenting, my colleague was answering questions online. 2 things happening at the same time in the past. We also use the past continuous for temporary situations in the past. So while the office was being renovated, I was working out of a hotel. When I was in Berlin last year, I was staying at the Hyatt. So this is something, I didn't move to the Hyatt. It's not my new home. It was something temporary for a short period of time. Something that happens in the past is your past continuous. Now, the next one's interesting. We use the past continuous, and this is also relevant for the present continuous too. If someone's behavior is irritating or bothers us, we don't like someone's behavior. If it's a repeated type of behavior that they have or action, we put this together with always or often or even constantly. And we use continuous to show that we're irritated or we don't like their behavior. So my colleague Bob was always interrupting people in the meeting. If I say he always interrupts people, I'm stating it as a fact. Or he always interrupted people, just a fact. If I say he was always interrupting people, this means I don't like it. I'm very irritated by it. So this is very interesting if you want to show a level of irritation, annoyance with someone, or it could be something. The printer was always jamming. Thank God we got a new one. So if something or someone is annoying you, past continuous is perfect to show that. Now we're here with past perfect. Now, first of all, let's go over a little bit of the structure of this. The core structure here is subject, had, verb 3. Verb 3 is your past participle, just that third column of verbs. So they had confirmed the report. They, subject, had, always need had, confirmed, that's your past participle verb in the third form, the report. Negative, they hadn't completed the report. Subject, hadn't, had not. Verb in the third form. Question, had they finished the report? Had, subject, verb in the third form. What's important to know here, if you're new to this past perfect tense, is past perfect must be before another time in the past. It never functions alone. If you do find an example of it functioning alone, it means that the already past simple time is already inferred. It's mentioned somewhere else. So it cannot go on its own in writing. It's always before past simple or past continuous. And if you don't see it with past simple and past continuous, it means it's just from context. People will understand it's before another time in the past. So that's your past perfect. That's your structure. Pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not many variations here. Now, when do we use it? We use it for an earlier past event. So we use the past perfect when one event happened before another past event. So when we arrived, the meeting had already started. So what this means is the meeting started, then later we arrived. But in English, you put those together and kind of flip them. You're going to tell what happened first and then what happened next. So when we arrived, the meeting had already started. So instead of saying the meeting started at 2 o'clock, we arrived at 3 o'clock. No. When we arrived at 3 o'clock, the meeting had already started. It's just such a beautiful way of really creating a picture of the timeline here. We use the past perfect for a completed action before a past point. So it shows that something was completed before a certain time. So by the end of June, the company had already reached its annual target. By the end of June, that's your past simple, the company had already reached its annual target. So something happened before the end of June, something happened before that. We use the past perfect for causes and explanations. We use it to explain a past result or reaction to a situation. So Julia was embarrassed because she had sent the wrong email to the wrong person. Julia was embarrassed, past simple, because she had sent the wrong email to the wrong person. So an action before, and it shows the cause and explanation. Why was she upset? Why was she embarrassed? Oh, because she had done this previously. We use the past perfect for earlier experiences. We use it before a particular moment in the past. So if you talk about something you did, that's past simple. You talk about something you didn't do, that's past simple. Now, if you want to talk about something like an experience, well, in present tense, we would use the present perfect. I've been to Tokyo. I've never been to Tokyo. If we want to talk about earlier experiences before another time in the past, this is where we use past perfect. So I'd never delivered a presentation in English before that day. That day, that's your past simple. You're not seeing past simple, but it's already a time in the past. That day is in the past, maybe last week. And I'd never delivered a presentation in English before that day. So something didn't happen. Or I delivered many presentations in English before that day. Something did happen before that day in the past. And again, this is a big one, flashbacks. Writers use flashbacks all the time in present perfect because it temporarily moves the story from here, from the present to the past, way back. So the building, I went to Boca Raton, and the building looked familiar. And I remembered, oh, I'd visited there 10 years prior. So I'm kind of doing a flashback. I had visited there a few years prior. So it means something is like a flashback in someone's mind. They're kind of going back in time. Next one is when you restore the main timeline. This is quite interesting. I have to read this one here. So someone had removed the document. I checked the printer and called the manager. So what we're saying here is there's an established timeline of events, but the narrator, the person talking, is returning to the past timeline and to the past simple. So really in the same line, I was looking for a certain document. I checked the printer, couldn't find it. Someone had removed the document and I called the manager. So by doing this, you can kind of mix these all together with the past perfect and the past simple. Someone had removed the document. I checked the printer. It's not there. And I called the manager. So here we're mixing them together, restoring a main timeline, which just means you're kind of you're talking in past simple or past continuous. I was looking for the document. Someone had removed the document. Then you're going back before you were looking for it. I checked the printer. You're going back to the main timeline of the story. and called the manager. Now you're continuing the story. So there's a little bit of the narrative tenses in past perfect continuous. The structure is pretty straightforward, just like the past perfect. Your subject had been, the verb in the ing form. They'd been waiting for an hour. Negative, subject hadn't been or had not been, verb in your ing form. They hadn't been waiting for long. Question, had, subject, been, verb, ing, had they been waiting for long? Now, one thing that's really important to remember, in continuous forms, we don't usually use non-action verbs. So if it's a word like know or have, meaning possession, you're not going to use it in a continuous form. That's pretty important to remember that. So let's take a look of when and where we use these, and we'll dive into mixing these together in the narrative tenses. First one is duration before a past moment. So they've been discussing the issue for 2 hours when the manager arrived. Now you could say they'd or they had discussed the issue for 2 hours when the manager arrived. That's fine. That's past perfect and past simple. But when you use past perfect, you're stating it there like a fact, just what happened. But if you say they'd been discussing the issue for 2 hours, you're putting that focus on the duration. And this is why we use continuous, and this is why it's so powerful, because you want to highlight that they were talking for 2 hours. So they'd been talking or they'd been discussing the issue for 2 hours when the manager arrived. And it really puts a lot of focus on the duration of something. Now we use this also for an earlier ongoing activity. So an activity that was continuing shortly, not a long time, before another past event. So she'd been preparing for the presentation when the client changed the deadline. She had been preparing for the presentation when the client changed the deadline. So an earlier ongoing activity before the client changed the deadline. We use it again for causes and results. It explains a visible past result. This is the same as the present perfect continuous. If you're not familiar with the present perfect and present perfect continuous, I did a great video on it that really describes each of these tenses and breaks them apart, of course, with a quiz and lots of examples. But this is the same here with the past perfect continuous. If you can see a visible result or explain a visible result of a past action, that's your past perfect continuous or present perfect continuous. But here, past perfect because it's before another time in the past. So when I saw Jim, he looked exhausted because he had been traveling all night. So he looked exhausted. That's a visual result of a past action because he had been traveling all night. Now, again, we have repeated activities. If repeated activities again and again over a period in the past, the supplier had been missing deadlines for months. If I say the supplier missed deadlines for several months, it's a little strange having it in past perfect. I want to say the supplier had been missing deadlines for months, so we found a new supplier. So it just means this is repeated. By using continuous, it means that action repeated itself over time. Now, one more here is the focus on the process. Same thing with present continuous. If you want to focus on, or even past continuous, if you want to focus on the process of something, she'd been writing the report all afternoon and finally went home. So again, we want to focus not necessarily on the duration, but it could be the process, on the action. I want to add emphasis to what someone was doing. I want you to imagine them working on that report very, very hard. So she'd been writing the report all afternoon, then she went home. So that's the focus on what she's doing. Now, what's really important here is not to overdo the past perfect or past perfect continuous. Incredibly useful, incredibly important, used all the time. If you find you're not hearing people speak in past continuous and past perfect continuous, past perfect continuous and past perfect, it's because we're always contracting. So I wouldn't say I had worked on that report for 2 weeks. No, I'd been working on that report for 2 weeks. I had been working on that report for 2 weeks. So this is the same thing with present perfect. A lot of people think, well, I don't hear it very much. Yes, you hear it all the time. Instead of saying, I have been here for a week, I've been here for a week, I've. So we're always contracting. It's more advanced in your spoken English to contract. This comes with past perfect continuous. Contract as much as possible. Now let's a little comparison here between past perfect simple or continuous. A completed result. She had written the report before the manager arrived. That's a focus on just the report being completed. She'd finished the report before the manager arrived. Just a focus on the report being done before the manager arrived. Focusing on a completed result before another time in the past. Now, if you change that same sentence to continuous. I'd say she'd been writing the report before the manager arrived. Now I'm putting an emphasis here on the duration or the activity, and by choosing the continuous form, I don't know if that report was completed or not. So this can be a little tricky. Okay, now let's hear the narrative tenses in action. Now the past simple moves the story forward. The past continuous sets the atmosphere. The past perfect shows what's happened before the main timeline of the story. And the past perfect continuous shows what was happening or what was going on before the main timeline of the story, or what was continuing for a long period of time before the main timeline. Let's go through here. I'll read you a story and you can hear these all working together. When Carlos arrived at the office, everyone was searching for the signed contract. The client had requested it the previous evening, and the legal team had been preparing the final version for several hours. Carlos opened his laptop and checked the shared folder. Someone had saved the document under the wrong project name. He renamed it, sent it to the client, and called the legal team. A few minutes later, the client confirmed they had received it. Everyone was beginning to relax. Carlos suddenly noticed another problem. They had attached an older version of the contract. Okay, now a great time to use narrative tenses is in an interview. If you don't know, there's this thing called the STAR technique, and this is how you answer an interview question using the STAR method. S is your situation, T is your task you had to do, A is the action you took to solve the problem, and R is the result of this. So this is very common. If you don't know much about the STAR technique, I have a video on it. I'll link to it here. And if you are interviewing, make sure you know how to answer questions using the STAR technique. People do expect it, recruiters expect it. But this is a perfect example of when narrative tenses shine and would make your answer to these questions so much better. I'm going to give you an example here. So your interviewer says, tell me about a time when you solved a problem at work. Typical question, typical question. So your answer could be, I was preparing a client for a presentation when our main data file suddenly crashed. I needed to recover the key figures before the meeting started. I'd already saved an earlier version and had been checking the data throughout the week, so I quickly rebuilt the final section and backed everything up. We started the meeting on time, the presentation went smoothly, and the client approved the proposal. Okay, so that was your situation, your task, your action, your result. But if you notice there, I've mixed together all the narrative tenses. So I'm going to give you a story in past simple. And you need to change this same story into narrative tenses to make it a far better story. Here's your story. I prepared the file all morning. I opened my laptop. The phone rang and I saw the file was missing. I called my manager and fixed the problem. That's the story. Very boring because it's all past simple. It's a very boring story. Now let's work on the narrative tenses and see how interesting and how much more engaging my story is going to be. So I prepared the file all morning. I opened my laptop. So what happened first? I opened my laptop or I prepared the file all morning? I prepared the file all morning. So throw that into your past perfect. I'd been preparing the file all morning. I was opening my laptop. That's setting the scene. So you're actually imagining me opening my laptop. I was opening my laptop when the phone rang. So I was opening my laptop. The phone rang in the middle of me opening my laptop, interrupted that. And I saw the file had gone missing. Past simple. That's what's happening. Moves the story forward. I called my manager and fixed the problem. So even just saying, I prepared the file all morning, I opened my laptop, the phone rang, and I saw the file was missing. It's just a collection of events. Nothing's really happening. But I'd been preparing the file all morning. I was opening my laptop when the phone rang, and I saw the file had gone missing. So here now I'm adding all these different tenses to really layer and make this so much more interesting. I called my manager and fixed the problem. Okay, we've done it. We've gone through narrative tenses. We've brought together the 4 tenses that you need to truly tell a good story. Hopefully you gained a lot of value out of this lesson and now you feel more comfortable using the narrative tenses. Thank you so much for joining me. If you did enjoy the video, I encourage you to like the video and subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow here. Thank you.